like a good story. But I think it's also more than that, because not only are we enjoying the process and understanding the issue that's being discussed in the book, but we learn in the process not just the immediate story that's being told, but what's around the edges and in the gaps, which is also stimulating and interesting and informative for us all. If we want to move forward, however, in our thinking about bioethics, we need to understand not just our own values and beliefs and prejudices, however they are obtained, but those of other people. So it's not just enough for me to know what it feels like to be the lesser speckled novelist. It would help me to know what it feels like to be a mighty bioethicist and to understand why you respond as you do. And in order to do this, we need perspective. From stories, we can get a sense of connection to other generations, cultures, experiences, and circumstances, which gives us a wider perspective. We can also get inside the skin of the different protagonists in the story to feel what it's like to be each one of them, to face their issues and concerns. And we can, if we are inclined to do so, gain a degree of empathy with them, feel compassion for their situation, which gives us a deeper kind of perspective. Some imaginative tutors have used my novels to teach the issues to do with ethics, and they've encouraged the students to take on the role of somebody whose opinions they disagree with in order to get inside the skin of someone and understand a different way of looking at the issues. And indeed, fictional characters can powerfully influence our own thinking. So by thinking outside our own boxes, we can be challenged to think further, not just what would I do in this circumstance, but what would I do if thus or so was the case? And what are the implications of this understanding for the future, which gives us a much rounder perspective. I say fiction challenges us, but I think I should qualify that, because it presumes that the reader wants to be challenged and wants to overcome their innate prejudices and preconceptions, and that they are in fact capable of change. I had a fantastic discussion, the best I've ever had, with an elderly person whom I visit fairly frequently. Soon after my 5th novel, Right to Die, came out, and that's about assisted dying. And she read it, and she said, of course, I don't agree with all that. And all that, in inverted commas, meant in her terms, playing God. And I had what I thought was a very good discussion with her, presenting a different viewpoint. And she said at the end of it, well, I'm really glad you explained all that to me, because I hadn't understood it. And I retained this kind of nice warm feeling that I had struck a blow for a more compassionate understanding in this lady, until she asked me what my next book that comes out in 3 weeks' time was about. And I said, it's about Alzheimer's. Oh, good, she said. That won't be controversial. I didn't agree with all that. So obviously this lady doesn't want to be taken out of her comfortable little well-tried and tested opinion. She doesn't want to be rattled. And she certainly wouldn't have any truck with science fiction, which is my 6th point, because science fiction is going to take her into areas that she's definitely not going to agree with. For a long time, we've had fictionalized accounts of clinical cases, which have been used to allow a more in-depth exploration of what actually happens in clinical practice, and enables doctors and nurses and allied professionals to understand where mistakes have been made, for example, to improve care for the future. People like Brian Hurwitz and Rita Sharon have written on these kinds of uses of narrative. But fiction too, science fiction, speculative literature, can also make us think about the future. And in foreseeing what could happen, we can be both forewarned and potentially forearmed. There's an abundant literature which suggests potential risks arising out of medical advances and experiments, warnings of what it means to play God, as the lady said. Stories about human experimentation, animal-human hybrids, genetic engineering, like these, for example. Stories of human cloning. And pushing the boundaries of organ transplantation. And these books make us ask, what can we do? What might we do? What should we do? And what might be the consequences? I must admit, I'm personally less inclined to reflect in that kind of way when the story is very far-fetched. So, for example, the Pegoons and Woolvogs and bizarre mating rituals of oryx and crake are so way out that I personally find it hard to think seriously about the enormous number of ethical issues that are included in the book. There's animal and human experimentation, transgenic splicing, organ transplantation, germ warfare, designer babies, assisted suicide, mutating microbes. The list just goes on, all in one book. I'm more persuaded by books which are essentially credible and realistic, but inch us a bit further into what if. My own book, Paternity, arose from the premise that sperm donors are a diminishing breed and that there are risks associated with using fresh sperm banks and overseas clinics. So I asked questions like, what if we extended the use of frozen, quarantined, tested sperm for more women? And a whole lot of other questions. It's not science fiction, it's today's reality, just taken a step further. And if I am to use fiction to really think about the issues seriously, I think for me there have to be a number of qualities in this writing. I like it to be scientifically accurate. I like it to be compelling and engrossing as a story, even disturbing, so that I actually care about what happens. If it's too literary, if it's the kind of book that would never make me walk into a lamppost, and I have to work hard at understanding what it is that the author is trying to tell me, or if it's badly written and could do with a good edit, I just don't engage with the story in the way that I need to if I'm going to learn through the process of reading it and to reflect on the issue in a sensible way. And obviously it's best if we can read widely all kinds of writing. For my next novel, the one on Alzheimer's, my publisher said to me at one point, I want you to go out there and look at all the books that include Alzheimer's, all the novels that include dementia in some form or other, and identify whether, and see if any of them identify with your unique selling point. At the last count, I found 38 books, fiction, that involve dementia in some way, and I've read most of them. And this has told me is that there's a big responsibility on authors. I think they have a duty to be ethical, even when they're working with pure fiction. Not just to get known scientific facts right, but not to encourage distorted views and false impressions. And I think readers can actually be very hard taskmasters. The book that I mentioned before, Still Alice, which is a brilliant book about a lady with Alzheimer's, it's been out for some time, and there's a review by, I think it's a neuropsychiatrist on Amazon, and he absolutely tears it to pieces and says, in essence, that it's unworthy of a woman with a PhD and clinical credentials, because he has got all these gripes with exactly how she has presented things. And he lists all the things that he thinks she should have dealt with in a much more detailed way. And obviously, if she had done so, the book would have been totally unreadable to everybody who has enjoyed it. But I think there's another cautionary point in this too, because the more technically accurate